Awesome. That was a fun, like little fact to sneak in right before coming onto stage. But good to be here and good to meet you all. I'll just do a quick intro also with the background of these guys, other than the fun facts. So we have Kart. Kart is a venture partner with Superangel at the moment. She also founded and runs Mojo Capital, which is a kind of investor directly in startups, but also in funds across Europe. And I think Superangel has done quite a bit of AI investments recently. The most recent announced one I could find was B-Cause, but I know you've also done a couple really cool ones recently. Then we have Herman. Herman's partner at Curiosity VC. They actually only invest in companies with some type of AI angle, which is very cool, very relevant for this panel. Most recently, I think they invested in QA Tech, which is actually one of our companies as well, and also Neeple, which is doing automation of AI workers, basically. And then we have Luke of NEA. NEA has been doing some really big bets in AI recently, most recently in Sana around the corner in Stockholm, but also in Perplexity, which is obviously a tool that I think a lot of us here use a lot. I'm Magnus. I'm from byFounders. We're an early-stage community-driven fund. We've also done a bunch of AI investments. Most recently, we've done one in QA Tech and in ICO Corp, which is AI agents for pen testing. So this is a very easy topic to be talking about right now, I think. Like when I was doing these kinds of talks about AI 2 years ago, I'd normally have to start by saying, like, why is AI kind of relevant? Like, what's the cool stuff that's been happening in AI recently? But I think right now, everyone here has probably been using AI very recently. So firstly, like, who's here has spoken to a chatbot in the last 24 hours? If you could raise a hand. So yeah, fairly, and what about in the last month? So it's a little bit hard to count in the smoke here, but I think the downmile of that is like pretty good, right? Like we have very solid like retention of this kind of thing. And so right now we're in basically like 2 years into kind of the latest AI boom. There's been a lot of AI booms, summers and winters over the years. Now we're like 2 years deep into the latest summer, and this summer feels like the warmest and brightest that AI has seen so far. So are there any signs of this AI summer kind of tapering off? Is there a potential AI winter coming up? And have you spotted any reasons to believe so? Like maybe let's start with Kart.
I mean, there's definitely hype. We all know that there is hype. There's a lot of wannabes, and I think that will taper down. Like sort of anything with AI in its name or URL will no longer get easy financing. But the serious stuff, I think, is here to stay and to grow.
I also think we're only at the beginning here. The technology progression is actually accelerating and is building on top of what we have. So now we have language models, language understanding, but the next thing will be agents, and then the next thing will be tools that computers that use tools. So I think we're only at the start, and we will see a lot more coming actually.
What about like the counter point there that we still haven't had a single model beat GPT-4 consistently across benchmarks, and it's been like a year and a half, almost 2 years now since GPT 3.5, 3.4 came out. Like, isn't that a sign of some kind of tapering?
I don't think so. I think, of course, it comes in waves. So maybe we have a short break now, but then the next models will be better, at least an order of magnitude than what we've seen so far. I think you actually shared this article that in the 2 years before GPT-4, from GPT-2 to GPT-4, it was like an order of magnitude better. And we're also seeing that just taking the lines and in sort of improvements in performance, we will see that in the coming 2 years as well.
Do you agree, Luke?
I mean, I agree with what they both said. I do think these things take time, right? And I think we need to be patient, but the time to value of a lot of companies that are building an AI is the best. It's the fastest that we've seen of any category. And I think another point that's important to think about too is, I mean, if you're building a company in AI, think about how hard it is to hire a data scientist or an AI engineer. Like that's going to get easier as more people get trained in these use cases. And I think as we see more talent come to this category, the number of companies that we see are going to continue to explode. I think the quality of the technology will get better. I think there's the two rate limiters that I see today is one, unlocking data to train on, and then alongside data is compute. But then the second big one, I think, is talent. And I think both of those will eventually, people will work on where the bottlenecks are. And then when those things get solved, the speed continues to increase. So I know it's raining today, even though we're in the middle of summer, but I take the view that we are in the summer and sunny part of AI, and I think it's going to be here for a while.
Yeah, and maybe to your point about models beating each other, there's also a possibility that we're the divergence between small language models and large language models, and we need specialized evaluation tasks for the small language models that are trying to do something very specific better than the large language models, and they should not be evaluated the same. We recently invested in a great Swedish company whose name I cannot disclose yet, but who is doing exactly that, sort of devising specialized evaluation tasks.
Interesting.
Maybe one thing to add is I also think that we have seen massive investments in the infrastructure layer. So I think we've built that, and that is now becoming available for entrepreneurs to build upon. But we haven't seen the massive investment and successes in the application layer. So that is yet to come. The next Uber is the next Salesforce. Uber building on the mobile wave, Salesforce building on the cloud wave. So what is going to be the next Uber or Salesforce on the AI wave? I think that is still to come.
I think that's super interesting because also another argument then on the kind of more bearish take on this is that I think that as an investor, probably a solid half of the companies that I speak with are basically AI companies in various ways. It's probably also a filtering thing. I obviously look for AI companies, but on some gut level, I feel like this should be a signal that things are too hot on some level, right? When there's too many things, too many people going into the same niche, right? So, can all of these companies, and a lot of them are application layer companies, are all of them do they all have a good shot at becoming the next Salesforce, the next Uber?
No, definitely not. But it's good that a lot try, and then the best will emerge. That's how competition works. So I applaud that. Everybody should go for it. But of course, only a few will survive and then grow and become the next Salesforce or Ubers. Yeah.
Cutthroat Darwinism. I love it. That's
good. I'll jump in. I think there's been some funny social media activity, following Jensen Huang and him autographing someone's shirt. I don't know if you saw this.
Yeah,
people are oh, that's definitely the peak now, right? But I don't think it's a negative thing. I mean, we see the same thing. The volume of companies in the AI space that we're seeing, or AI-related companies, is definitely the leading category of companies that we're seeing. But I don't think that's a sign of... sometimes it can be an indicator that things are too hot. But in my opinion, this technology touches every industry. And so if you're not incorporating it into your company in some way, I think you're at a disadvantage. The speed at which these models can compute and generate output, the efficiency gains you get if you're just implementing these things in your company. If you're not doing it today, I mean, we tell our portfolio companies, look, it's worth spending 20% of your team's time and arguably 20% of your budget experimenting with these use cases. Not even so much building it into your product, you should absolutely be doing that, but two, as a user, because think about how much better, how much more efficient your company can become if you can incorporate these things into your work, your work processes. And so I think the fact that AI, it's a very, very broad term, and I think your point on verticalization is a very, very important one, and I agree with it. But the performance gains you get, I think, and how applicable it is across so many different industries, to me, is just an indication that we're at a step function change in computing. And I think people are realizing that now, and that's the enthusiasm that I think gets all of us excited to see companies and continue to innovate and push the envelope.
Yeah, I actually think we don't see that enough. Companies applying the AI to build their own company in a more efficient way. I think that is definitely something which we are looking for, and it will also help companies to be more capital efficient. The way when AWS came, okay, it was easier to run a company, to raise funding, and then build a company. Now, I think, again, this makes it much more efficient to build a company. Maybe, with only a very small team, you can create a really big impact.
Yeah, and maybe the parallel I could bring is 10 years ago, you could have asked, is data hype? Nowadays, no one would ask that, right? Everyone understands data is the air we breathe, and you have to have it, and it's foundational. But when we invested in iZettle, we didn't realize that it was going to become a data company and be sold as that. And the same was when we invested in Job and Talent, we thought we were investing in a recruitment company, and then we asked them, guys, do you do anything with AI? Because we just kind of went through a checklist with all of our companies and asked that. And they were like, we've been an AI company for 5 years now. And we're like, okay, that's how it evolves. Things that you don't realize are a certain type of company become that, because that is the paradigm that we live in now.
Yeah, makes sense. So I guess in summary, that's kind of like, I think that these are things that are all speaking very much towards that we're experiencing some kind of platform shift where AI is just becoming the kind of the air that we all breathe, and that it's going to be, it's kind of table stakes from now on, that you incorporate AI in some format, even though it might not be your kind of core value proposition. So then taking kind of the more bullish side of this, there was an article released just, I think, yesterday by a guy called Leopold Aschenbrenner, who's used to lead the super alignment team at OpenAI, where he's taking like the extreme bullish end of things and taking these lines drawn on a graph very far into the future. Actually, not that far, but the results feel like they should be far in the future. And basically saying that we should be getting AGI levels of kind of AI models around 3 years from now. We should have data clusters or GPU clusters for training roughly on the order of magnitude of $1 trillion in investment to make these things. So these are things that would be impacting the United States electricity production on the order of like 10 to 20%. And his main point in this article is no one is pricing this in to their current decisions around what they're investing in or what they are building. Do you think this level of bullishness is priced in at the moment? And are you personally kind of pricing it in?
I think some entrepreneurs want to price it in, yes. And we also do, but we also price in the increased risk. So if you have 1,000 companies trying the same thing and only one sort of is successful, then okay, you have to also price in that risk. So I think we price it in to the upside, but also to the downside.
So would you say that the odds of success of one of these 1,000 AI application companies, let's say, do you think it's worse or better than the kind of average startup from 5 years ago?
I think it's probably worse because there's more hyper competition. It becomes easier to set up a company, with the models becoming available for everybody. So I think competition increases, chances of success decreases a bit. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Are you pricing it in at NAA?
We like to think we do a good job pricing companies appropriately. We definitely, look, I think one of the things we say about valuation in general is that when you have a best-in-class team or a best-in-class company, you want to be in that company. And so whatever it takes, oftentimes, to be an investor in that company that's our mindset. Now, obviously, you have to be rational about these things. If you're paying, 500 million or beyond that for a seed or a Series A, the reality is that's also going to put the company at a disadvantage, because now you think about that hurdle rate you need to clear for the next round. I mean, if you're a model company, you can't just raise one round and be done. Like, these are very cash-intensive businesses. And so I think if you're a founder, like, absolutely you want to raise at a nice price, but you also want to think about what does my next round look like, and what are the milestones I need to deliver for the open market to then give me a favorable financing at that round. And then also think about the employees that you hire and the strike price of their options and everything. So look, there's a back and forth that I think just in terms of company building and being rational about the prices that we're paying. But I think a good example, I don't think for the mega upside, nobody prices that in entirely. And I think your point on the risk on the downside is also like very important, and that never gets priced in fully either. There's a happy balance. But like, look at NVIDIA and how much that stock has compounded in the public markets. It's been a public company for 20 years, and like all the value creation that they've seen in this AI boom. I don't think, maybe there's 2 or 3 people that I saw that coming. Jensen's probably one of them, but beyond that, like, the reality is nobody can really price in this mega upside. But we're certainly very optimistic, and I think when you come talk to us at NEA, I'll speak for us. Like, we want to be in the best companies, and what it takes to get in those companies is what we try and do.
Makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely the same. We try to remain rational with the pricing. We try to maybe stay a bit on the edges and on the infrastructure and picks and shovels in a gold rush kind of a mentality right now, and to see who is winning the big bets. But we definitely want to be in the best ones, and we're willing to take maybe a little bit extra risk.
One more thing I want to say on this, though, because I think your point on risk and competition is a really important one. People always talk about the incumbency risk, and there are some very large tech companies that have, they have, in my opinion, 2 very important advantages relative to new startups that are emerging. And one is they have massive access to compute, and then number 2 is they have these huge data assets. And I think both, like, this actually makes me a little bit worried too, because look, we want to invest in the next wave of companies. We favor competition. I think if there is one place that I think people aren't focusing maybe enough, is looking at this from a regulatory landscape and how do we create an environment that is favorable for startups? Because, look, we have some companies that have gone in our portfolio, Perplexity, like as an absolute rocket ship. Sana released their AI assistant about a month ago. In the first 2 weeks, they had 10,000 companies sign up. But those are still very small companies. You know, the reality is they have tiny balance sheets relative to the Facebooks, the Amazons, you know, these massive, Microsoft, for example. And those are the businesses that they're going to eventually be competing with. You know, Google and Perplexity's case. And I think that is a massive risk, and I think that's part of the you know, on the downside too. The companies need to reach that exit escape velocity, and I think the ability to get there is quite challenging with some of these larger players.
No,
So something to think about.
I fully agree that the compute is the bottleneck, but I think I'm a little bit more optimistic in the light of the last quarter or so that that's actually going to get solved as well, and then we're in a completely new world because like Grok's new LMU chips, the thermodynamic chips that are coming out, like people have understood that this is the place where to focus on now because again, AI is here to stay. Like this demand for compute is only getting bigger.
So do you believe in the kind of $1 trillion data center within 3-4 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, sick, okay, awesome. So, I mean, right now the kind of cutting edge when it comes to AI and when it comes to automating work is very much centered around kind of agents. That's been the talk of the town for like the last year and a half-ish since AutoGPT came out. And there's obviously a very direct link between using an AI agent, which is normally like an LLM in an agentic environment where it can self-reflect, often use some kind of tooling to do actions and that kind of stuff. And the link between that and automating work of people very directly is obviously very clear. Suddenly you almost have the labor model of SaaS, where you can start taking essentially some kind of wage for an AI kind of digital worker. What's your current view around how these AI agent companies are going to do, given that, for example, there's rumors that OpenAI will launch an AI agent like later this year, probably? I can start with you, Herman, maybe.
Yeah, we strongly believe in the move to agents, and what we then look for is multi-agent systems, where you have specific, specialized agents working together to solve a specific task. I'm also thinking about, okay, what's then, is there a possibility that agents from different companies start working together? So we need some new protocols, you know, of agents working together across companies, across supply chains. I think that is a field which we are really interested in. I already have some examples in our portfolio, indeed. Nepal is one, but QA Tech actually also has the model where you have different agents. One agent sort of can orchestrate, one agent can review a specific result from an agent. So I think it creates really good results at also efficient cost.
Yeah, I'll build on that. I think what I would encourage a lot of the founders in the audience to think about is, I think it's inevitable that this is a world we're going to be living in. It's going to be an AI agent-driven world. So I think an opportunity to think about, and we would love to see companies and ideas here, is how do we innovate existing platforms to fit this new paradigm of interacting with the world. I'll give you an example of one. Think about search on the web. Like a lot of web pages, that content is built for our eyes, right? That's why it's a very visual-based. We have all HTML, CSS tags, all these buttons and everything. But that's not a perfect interface for an AI agent, right? The agent's not actually seeing the web page. They're just getting the text. So how do you think about recrafting a protocol for an agent to go do a web query and carry out a search? If I say, like, hey, to like my OpenAI bot, like, can you go please pull these 10 articles from the New York Times? It's going to go to the page, but it can't actually, like the source doesn't load. It just sees like the JavaScript and it comes back, oh, I didn't find any articles. That's an imperfect use case, you know? So we need to think about how do we re-engineer some of these like processes that we take for granted today for a world that's driven by agents. And that, I think, is a really interesting opportunity. And I think we'll see a lot of companies built solving those problems in different ways.
Yeah, and we've actually seen some founders in Scandinavia working on these like really massive things like Google for agents and sort of trying to reimagine the web. And I just hope that something will also be left behind for the humans to consume as well.
Yeah.
But absolutely, we also believe that agents is the next level. We've invested in something that, interesting, doesn't call it agents yet. It just calls it automated workflows. But in the end, it doesn't really matter, right? It's something getting done by not humans. And then the sort of testing startup that we invested in also obviously looks at the risk side of that. As in, there are tests that it wants the LLMs to pass, but there's also tests that it wants the LLMs to fail, or if it gets close to passing, then we should all be very, very worried. And one of those tests is, can this LLM generate an LLM? Because then it's agents generating agents, and the sort of cat is out of the bag.
Yeah, super interesting. So I mean, building on that also, obviously as you start automating individual job categories, one of the most valuable job categories on Earth right now is the category of software engineering. So the people that are actually building these engines ultimately, right? And there's another article written by Chris Pike just a few days ago that I also shared with you guys, which was an essay that was titled "The End of Software." So basically talking about that the future of software will more and more end up being small, custom, very tailored pieces of software for your company's specific use case, which kind of replaces the kind of monolithic SaaS apps that's supposed to be for everyone. So the question is then, like, if this is the future, does that mean the end of the regular old B2B SaaS that I think we've all been investing in for the last few decades? Like, is that a non-investable category now?
I think it's more a natural evolution, from the monolithic software to microservices and SDKs and APIs. So we're moving, more to indeed, micro agents that work together. So I think it's not the end of software; it's just a different form and an evolution of what we've already seen.
Yeah, I have a little bit more extreme view to build on that. I do think it's moving in this direction. It makes me very nervous because I am trained as a software engineer. I've invested in SaaS companies the first 7 years I've been at NEA. And I actually think, if you think about Silicon Valley, the venture ecosystem, the entrepreneurial ecosystem we lived in for the last 50 years, it started with chips, right? Fairchild Semiconductor, like the Rebellious 8 or something, they leave, they start their own chip companies and network switch companies. This is all hardware. That was the bedrock of Silicon Valley in the 1970s and 80s. And then we get the internet age and we get the SaaS age. And I think we're going to go back into a hardware innovation cycle. And it makes me nervous because I have no training there. But it's crazy. I mean, you guys have a shared portfolio company in QA Tech, and they're doing amazing things in generating automated test cases for software developers. And you can actually generate whole programs now. I think this is one of the reasons why, for us at NEA, we are putting a lot of value in highly complex software, because I think for low-value use cases, these are things in the next 2 years. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens in the next year, because the rate at which this compounds, you'll see AI agents building custom vertical-specific use cases for very niche markets, and that's where I think that value is very hard to replace. So I think it's moving in that direction.
No, absolutely. Certain things are clearly getting easier, right? Like revenue per employee has been creeping up quite significantly over the last few years, which means that people are being assisted in doing stuff. And we have a portfolio company that normally does sort of cybersecurity for operational technology, but then they just sort of whipped up an AI code assistant for operational technology coding, which is harder than information technology. And they were like, oh yeah, it was just kind of easy to do, it didn't take that much time or effort. And I think we're starting to see more and more of that, where people just come up with very simple or complicated things that are now suddenly simple to execute.
Makes sense. Yeah, you want to add something?
Well, I think there's other industries where the threat maybe is way higher, where the information worker does a lot of repetitive tasks in accounting, in law. I think there, we might see bigger changes than in software development, actually.
Makes sense. So, I mean, I think building on that, I think especially the kind of revenue per employee side, I think back in 2014, I don't remember which one was acquired which, but WhatsApp was acquired when they were at roughly 50 employees, I think for $19 billion at the time. Instagram was acquired when they had 10 employees for $1 billion, roughly like that. I think we also had Instacart, which obviously had a large workforce, but the actual employees in the actual company, I think they were roughly 20 people when they hit unicorn valuation, right? So we've been able to build unicorns with less than 100, less than 50 employees for 10 years now, right? So the question is then, how much and how fast is this going to creep down? Are we going to see a 5-person unicorn, a 3-person unicorn within the next few years? What do you think?
Well, we've actually seen a 5-person unicorn.
Yeah?
It's not a tech company, though.
Which one?
But Kylie Cosmetics
Oh, yeah, true.
was like 5 or 6 years ago.
Fair.
But she
Yeah, good.
sold that company, and she like half the company for $1 billion. So,
True.
and they had 4 employees at the time.
Good
of sale.
example, yeah.
Yeah.
She didn't even have AI in the name. That's
Yeah, it
fantastic.
didn't even have AI. So that's how you know it's a legit business.
Yeah.
But no, I do think you'll see, I mean, this is where the trend lines are moving. And especially as a lot of these like parts, the parts that you need to build a company become automated, I do think you'll see less and less. There will be companies with less employees, certainly. Yeah. I don't know if you guys agree.
I also agree, but I do think that on the other hand, they will use all kinds of services that are also maybe smaller companies. So in the end, the people that are working on to get something from the ground is still sizable. So.
No, and I think someone will do the one-person unicorn just for the fun of it, but I do think that there's more value in the team than just building software or executing simple tasks. There is emotional support and just sort of getting through it. So I don't think it's worth trying to build a one-person unicorn, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a good point as well. I guess ultimately it's like, similarly, I mean, Instagram was 10 people, but they were using web services that were probably run by hundreds of people in data centers. It's just the line that we drew around Instagram was worth $1 billion. I'm also very interested in the idea of like a 0-person unicorn at some point, if you end up having basically an owner that just has an AI model run the entire company from scratch, right? That's probably the next barrier to hit. So just wrapping up then, what's kind of one piece of advice that you give to AI founders, specifically pitching to investors right now? Given the things that we've spoken about before, about like a much higher chance of failure, higher chance of being beaten by an incumbent, data moats, all this kind of stuff. What is it that the founders should be nailing to actually be relevant to speak with you guys? We start with Luke, maybe.
Yeah, I was just thinking. I'd say a few things. So first of all, I think we always like to see examples of how you're building something that's proprietary or defensible. It's not like a great thing to say because people always roll their eyes, but I think that it does matter on the investing side. And what I would encourage you to talk about in your pitches, I think the point of defensibility that is most interesting is around data. If you have some sort of proprietary data, access to some database or whatever it is, like that to me is a very, very interesting part of the pitch. The second one, I think this category is so new, and there are so many companies that are entering it, but there are some companies that have significant weight in the industry today. Try and build connections to those companies. I met a company in Paris last week. They have really great traction, but I asked the founder, hey, how connected are you to OpenAI and to Mistral and to some of these large models, because they're working with these companies, and the team had no connections there. They hadn't built those yet. To me, I think you want to be in the room with people that have a lot of influence, because things are going to be built on top, as we said before, like on top of other companies. You want to be cross-pollinating as much as you can, and I think now more than ever that really matters. And so I would also encourage you to grow your networks in that way. I think it's going to give you an advantage.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think whenever there's this new technology, a lot of companies start with the technology. And then they come up with some solution to apply the technology broadly. So my advice would be to really specifically focus on a customer problem and explain in the pitch what the customer problem is that you're fixing. Instead of sort of, okay, we apply AI to make reports or in general. I think that is something which I hear a lot, and we only look now at really concrete solutions for specific customer problems.
Does it help to have an AI domain name, at least?
I don't think so. Actually, also towards customers, maybe you should avoid talking about AI.
Interesting. Yeah. Scary. How about you, Kart?
I agree, firstly, that it's data and that it's unique data, but also ethically sourced data, because I think we're going to see more and more of questioning or of where some of this model data is from. And the other one is security. So being able to make sure that your AI doesn't end up in the wrong hands, but also that you can sort of set boundaries to it when you need to.
Interesting. Yeah, is that mainly for the enterprise perspective, that the enterprises care about that as a customer? Or?
Oh, definitely, but I think also just as a even consumer focused or whatever your focus is, you have to make sure that whatever you're doing with AI cannot be misused, because the risk for that is much higher than with normal software.
Makes sense. Well, thanks so much for your time, and thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate doing this with you guys. So thank you.
Thank you.